I was a process engineer, purely technical. Nothing, didn't have anything to do with directly with marketing or finance. I sell myself to a business school. That was very difficult for an engineer like me.
Hey, Armin, great to see you again.
Likewise.
Yeah, nice to see an old friend. The scoop is out there. You're sitting at the new CBS building. We can see a little bit of the background behind you. So we know where the story is right now, but we don't know where it began. And so I want to share that because it's a fascinating story. Why don't you tell us a little bit about where you're from, which I think is really relevant, how you got to the United States to start, and then we can talk after that about how you decided to get an MBA.
I'm from Iran, and I moved to USA in December 2009 for my PhD program. I had a long story before I get to USA.
I always say you were like Rocky fighting your way out of Iran, but really you were using your brain. You were using your math brain to compete to get out of Iran. I think it's fascinating. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, so in Iran, it's a little different from the USA because there's limited seats, so we have to take an entrance exam for universities. I remember that back in the time, in 2005, there were 3 million applicants, and we have to take the exam together. And usually top 1,000 went to the best school in Iran, which was Sharif University of Technology. It used to be called Arya Mer University of Technology, then the name changed after the revolution. I ended up 1,000, I guess, and then I was registered in material science. I was more excited about electronics and high-tech back in the time. It was called high-tech, not anymore today. And so I changed my major. Again, I had to work super hard for 2 semesters to prove myself that I'm worthy of sitting with the top 10 in the school.
Right.
If I hadn't been able to do so, I would have been kicked out again back to the first major. So it was a big risk.
Yeah, you're a big risk taker. You're a big risk taker. You applied. You ended up at the University of Washington, probably studying something that few of us can really even understand. But you did your PhD at the University of Washington. You left behind your family in Iran. I mean, it seems like one would be really excited to come to America, but there was still like lots of risk involved. How did you make that choice in your life to come to the United States and to study at the University of Washington?
Well, it was very difficult, of course, because I hadn't been living away from my family for 21 years. And when I moved to USA, I was all on myself. I had to learn how to pay rent, how to pay utilities, be on time on that. So a big change, obviously, was scary a little bit, but after a few months, I got used to it. Once you overcome those hurdles, you realize it's not that difficult, or at least I guess humans get used to the new conditions super fast. And that paid off. I'm so happy that I took that decision, even though I'm still away from my family and so difficult. But I think when you see the reward, it's worth it.
So you studied for your PhD, you get your PhD. That's obviously a huge endeavor in and of itself. You go and you work in the high-tech field, and you can tell us a little bit about that.
I studied electrical engineering, and my focus was on semiconductors. So my PhD took 5 years and a half, and I was super excited about it. So I got a job right after PhD, which was very relevant to my research, and I was very privileged to be able to go to that path because I directly applied whatever I learned in PhD at work, which is very rare because usually when you publish your research, it goes to the shelf and collects dust most of the time instead of being applied right away. So I'm so super lucky for that.
I'm supposed to be asking the questions, not answering them, but I'm gonna ask and answer this one because I think the most difficult part of the process for you was trying to convey in really simple terms what you do, because like what you did in the high tech world, because you were so technical and such a technical person, it was hard to break down. But now that I've said that, maybe I will ask you a question. What did you do, before you went to Columbia? Because you completely changed the process at your entire firm. That was really remarkable, and I think was your flagship achievement that showed that you had business competency. Persuading an entire company to change their processes. That's a big deal. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure. So my PhD was about simulation and modeling. And, when you simulate, you reduce the cost because you predict whatever is going to happen in the future without incurring that. Usually in my company, it was mostly based on trial and error. So they had to kind of like take a shotgun approach of trying multiple different scenarios and see
to fabricate microchips.
To fabricate microchips.
And the microchips that end up
in cars, laptops, whatever that has a camera.
the chip shortage in the auto industry. Those are the types of chips that you meant that you helped to fabricate. Am I right?
Yes. The chip shortage happened after COVID, but again, it applied because cheap. Manufacturing in micro semiconductors, it was very competitive. Each year, you have to come up with the new designs. Customers expect that from you, and there are lots of competitors, and each one of them are very smart, and they produce high quality microchips. So you have to be all the time first in the market to be able to get the market share. Therefore, if you make mistakes, not only you incur a lot of costs, but you may lose that window that you can attract your customers and lock in deals with them. And that's very important to be able to do that, because if you somehow be able to be on time and at your first trial meet the targets, that's going to make you the winner. And that's the secret sauce of all the successful manufacturers in the semiconductor industry.
And that's effectively what you helped your company do, correct?
Exactly. I was referring that I was very lucky because of that, because my PhD was about modeling and simulation, and I carried the knowledge that I had during my PhD into my company and helped them basically make the simulations and models much more accurate than the commercial software that we were using. Because we were using a commercial software, they are having models that can be used by any manufacturers, microprocessors, image sensors, or memories, but we had to fine-tune it to our own applications, and you had to have in-depth knowledge about it and be able to understand it first and retrofit it to your own products. And that's what I was doing, and it turned out to be successful.
Right, you sort of were seeing the future. You were creating models that they could fabricate, and then they could create chips on the basis of your vision, and they would be more likely to work because of your processes. And so it's a tough thing to convey. It's a tough thing to make sexy in one's application, but I think you found a way to do it. And I think that there aren't a lot of people in business school with operational backgrounds, and that was a huge advantage for you. But you just needed to get to the point where you could convey it in a pithy manner to the admissions committee. Let's talk about that. So you finish a PhD, you're doing well in your career, you've made it, you're the American dream, you're making it in the United States. I mean, why go back and get that MBA at that point in your life?
That's a very good question, because at the end of my career, I realized that I'm kind of like doing one thing over and over again, and I realized that I don't have the impact that I hope to have. I wanted to have a larger scale of impact on customers, products, and partners, and I realized being an engineer, the career path an engineer has is all the time the same. And that's one thing I didn't like at all. And I realized, okay, what I can do to exit this kind of career path and find more opportunities. And MBA was, for me, the best solution. And that's why I applied for MBA. And it's necessary, of course, because I didn't have any business background, no education in that source. I had no idea about finance or marketing and how the business people think about problems, which is very different from technical people.
Right.
And that's why I applied for MBA.
Just walk us through the timeline, the process of studying for another test, right? You're a test taker, process of studying for more tests, the process of putting together the applications themselves. How long did it take you? How much did you work on it? How hard was it for you?
Well, I can answer the last question first. It was very difficult. And I had to start from GMAT, I guess, like anyone else. And for me, it took 6 months because English is my second language, and I mentioned that already 3 times. It was very difficult. I started with a Manhattan Prep program, and I took a mock test initially, and I scored 420. I was supposed to be above 700, and it was so disappointing, and the teachers were like, no, you're not going to make it. So yes, after I spent a lot of time and energy, after 6 to 7 months, I managed to score a 700 plus score. And that aside, then once I took the test, I had to now work on my essays and find how I can basically translate this story for the business school. And that was the next step, which I believe it took us 1 year or 1 year and a half, which was a long process, and it was very difficult to, again, market this engineer to business school. I was smart enough to look for the best, so I found Jeremy Shinewald to help me on this. Obviously, that helped me a lot because obviously I didn't have the capacity to do so. I needed your help, mbaMission, obviously. That helped me a lot too. First, you understand what I was doing, and second, how we can translate it into a business language to be understandable for the business schools. That was critical for me.
Thank you. That's very nice of you to say. I mean, we're a good team. We had a good time together, and a lot of drafts. I've got a folder with a lot of drafts from Armin. But he put the hard work in, because the same work that he would put in, to all those tests that we talked about, he would put the work into his applications. They were all his. Armin, how did you determine which schools you wanted to apply to?
I was living in the West Coast all the time. Since I came to USA, I wanted to explore East Coast as well. So the first filter was I applied for most of the schools that were in the East Coast. The second thing was obviously the network of alumni. I was thinking, if I want to invest my time and energy, it better be the top 10 schools. So that was the second filter. And then I was trying to see what are the entrepreneurial opportunities at each schools, which one has a better network of alumni and professors, how is the success of alumni after graduation, and these factors of basically helping to decide which school to apply.
So you apply to these East Coast schools, and it's a 1.5 year long process. You're fighting through the GMAT, and you're fighting through the interview process, which if I recall was a little bit challenging because again, English is a second language, and while you're an articulate guy, it still is tough to interview in a second language. And then ultimately, you get a positive decision from Columbia, which is great. And then there were some complications. So tell us a little bit more of the complications and how that affected your process.
Right. Unfortunately, we faced COVID, which affected everyone in the world, and so it was a time that business schools were going to make a hard decision for themselves, that they're going to have the classes fully online. And that was kind of like difficult for me to understand, because we go to business school just to socialize, be in person in the classes, and network. That's one of the biggest promises of business school. So I had to make big decisions, and I didn't want to go to online mode. I had to withdraw my application and reapply again. That was the hardest decision that I made after such a long journey of the hurdles and essay writing. And I got my positive admission, and it was very valuable and precious to me, yet I have to drop it and apply again. And it was risky. I was not sure how it's going to be received by Columbia Business School. I was worried whether they're going to receive it positively or negatively. So it was very risky. And
so what you're saying is you got into Columbia Business School twice.
Right.
It fits in with your theme of obstacles. You found 2 ways to get into the top university. You took one degree, went to the other, found a way to fight your way into that degree. You like to do things twice and put obstacles in front of yourself. What did you find most valuable about our relationship working together?
Now that I look back in hindsight, I see that it was a joint venture. And it was like me and you were a co-founder, basically, of that venture. And obviously in the times that it was very difficult for me, you were the one who supported me. I almost gave up. Even though I went through a lot of risky situations, you still was backing me up. And obviously it was very valuable. The technical part, yes, the translation of an engineer into business was not possible for me, absolutely. So I give 100% of the credit to you. But you have an amazing talent of gleaning insights, even from the stuff that I tell you. You still look at it in a different angle, and that was very precious.
Thank you, Armin. Any piece of advice that you have for any other applicants out there? Anything you want to share as a parting thought?
I would always recommend taking risks. That's the sure thing. It will be worth it. It's very scary at the beginning. It will take a lot of effort, but if you be consistent and persistent and be courageous about making big changes in your life, it will be worthwhile, your effort. That's my biggest recommendation to anyone.